everyone. I'm Meredith Florence, and this is my Keystone presentation titled Style Creates Content. It's the exploration of me writing a novella, and it's going to be about my writing process and styles of writing and the differences I found between them. So my motivation for doing this project is that I am a film student concentrating in screenwriting, and I have an English minor, and I really love writing, but in the film program at BU, I've had the chance to write screenplays and pilots and spec scripts, and I took one creative writing class and wrote some short stories, but there really hasn't been an opportunity for write anything longer than a short story in prose. So the Keystone Project seemed like a great opportunity for me to force myself to write something longer than a short story, and that's not a script. And so my project ended up being a actually 78-page novella titled The Underground, and it's titled The Underground because it takes place, a lot of it, in London on the Tube, which is also known as the Underground, and because a lot of the characters in it have kind of secrets hidden underneath underground, metaphorically. And so with that project, I originally intended to write a whole novel, but that didn't end up happening because I did not have time for that. So I also kind of wrote an essay detailing the writing processes and some of my challenges I'd found and the differences between screenwriting I'd found and writing a novel. And then I also wrote a synopsis of my work and an outline to accompany it in the event that I send it off to agents or publishers or graduate programs because they ask for that. And so my novella itself is kind of the logline is 4 very different characters' lives intersect on a film set, but the secrets they're keeping soon drive them apart. Then other side, it's set in London, and it's intended for a young adult audience, probably mostly females. There's like a romance in it. It's like kind of melodramatic. I'm going to tone it down in the next draft of it, but definitely YA audience. And some of the things I really aim to explore in it are how travel can change a person, how people can change over short periods of time if they're in a different environment, and how secrets both bring friendships together and can tear those friendships apart. And so my writing process, as I said, is that I've been trained in screenwriting for the past 4 years at BU, and I kind of thought that would be really easy to transition back into writing prose, and it wasn't. So I spent the first semester really just exploring the differences between writing a screenplay and writing a novel and what I could do in a novel that is impossible in a screenplay. And so that first semester I also really concentrated on that first chapter and wrote 6 or 7 drafts of that first chapter, trying out different narration styles, seeing what worked and what didn't. And in the second semester, I realized I really only had this first chapter perfect and then a few other little pieces, and I needed to actually write something. So I kind of just was like, I'm not going to revise anything. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to write as much as possible. So here's some of the major difference I've found between screenwriting and writing a novel. In screenwriting, you can only write down what you see and what you hear, and that's what's on the page. Whereas in a novel, you can really explore all senses, you can access the character's thoughts, you can really go in depth into those thoughts. Whereas in screenwriting, you only know characters through their actions. So like, let's say somebody like misses another character, you might show them like looking at a picture of them and looking sad or something in a screenplay, but in a novel, you can kind of go into their head. And also in screenwriting, you don't see any of like the flowery metaphorical language that you can use in a novel, and those really beautiful sentences don't really have a place in screenwriting. And screenwriting has a very, very rigid formula. You know exactly what needs to happen on page 30, what happens at page 90. It's exactly 100 to 120 pages long. Novels can be any length, any structure, any sort of forms of chapters. And your narration can be first person, second person, various forms of third person. So you really have a lot of options. And the major difference is that when you write a screenplay, there's so many people collaborating after you turn in that screenplay before it gets to the audience. You have your writers, you have your directors, you have your producers, actors, scenic designers, everything all come together to make your vision come to life. Whereas with a novel, sure, you bring it to your editor, your publisher, whatever, might make some changes, but your words are what goes to the audience and makes that presentation. So the novella I actually wrote is about these 4 characters. Sophie is a 21-year-old American film student. She is kind of in London for the first time by herself, kind of naive, kind of sheltered, and wants to just explore London. Austin is a 25-year-old, also American, worked in the film industry in LA, and for like some mysterious reason you don't really know at first, is hiding, running from something, and went to London to go live with his grandmother. And he's very charming, but also definitely has some secrets, very definitely kind of like cunning and tries to get away with a lot. Peter's a 22-year-old British man who works, it's his first job out of university. He works at a small production company as the assistant, and like should kind of be his dream job because he has a lot of creative say in what he's doing, but also has this really, really horrible boss who is sucking the life out of him. And Antonia is a British like heiress, kind of grew up very, very wealthy, but is also coming to terms with the fact that she no longer has the money she had and has to deal with that. And her mother actually owns the production company that Peter works for. And then so over the course of the novel, their lives all intersect. You find out that Peter and Austin are actually cousins. There's like Austin's blackmailing Peter. And so it starts on the tube. Each of their chapters, their narratives start on the tube, and you kind of get into their heads. And then Antonia and Sophie meet in Barcelona. Peter and Sophie actually have a past romance that gets rekindled in London on the film set. And they all kind of have these like crazy secrets. Like Antonia and Sophie bond because Antonia says her father's dead, but really her father's not dead. He just walked out of her life, and she doesn't have access to his money anymore. So it's all these like complicated things. And these eventually cause their friendships to completely fall apart. And at the end, each character is again on the tube with their thoughts, and it's kind of how they've changed and how these friendships have changed them. And then to take you through my writing process a little bit, this was the original first paragraph. Sophie is on the tube coming to London, super excited. And the one thing I like really didn't like about it is the first sentence. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this, because that's what I kind of wanted Sophie's entire opinion of London to be, but I didn't want that to be the first introduction you have of her, because I want her to be really excited. So then I rewrote it to be this, which is still in the first person. She sounds a little bit more excited, a little bit more urgent to get into the city of London. But I ended up actually switching it and writing it in third person. As you can see, it's almost exactly the same sentences, with just the pronouns switched. But this is because I originally wanted to write chapters from all four characters' perspectives, and found that writing in first person, their voices were blending together too much and they didn't sound like four distinct characters. So I wanted in third person, it made more sense. And then, so going forward, what I have right now is kind of a sketch of a novel. It's random chapters. Some of them are really short, just to like get all my ideas out. And so many of the writers I've talked to, both screenwriters and writers of novels, have said that the first draft is just to get all of your ideas out there on the page and kind of form the story in your head, and it's in revision that the story really comes together. So that's what I definitely need to do. Again, I'm not truly happy with the way the voice turned out. The pacing's weird. I need to add a lot more to turn it into a novel instead of a novella. So I'm going to continue to write, and then hopefully in the future I'll be able to find an agent to represent it, can send it off. I have the synopsis and outline, and we'll keep working on those as well. Most people want like a 20-page writing sample and then a synopsis, and not a whole novel to read. And so hopefully in the future it will lead to either it getting published, or I have this experience now and could write something else and hopefully launch a career as a writer. I think I have time for questions if anybody has questions. Vita? Or
how do you keep the characters' personalities separated like from your own personality? Like, how do you avoid like influences like the characters like polar opposite of you? How do you avoid having them like show like your own traits?
I mean, I think the way you keep characters real is by putting elements, even if they're kind of polar opposite of you, to keep them human, you put elements of yourself or elements of other people you know in them. Keeping them separate is like, it can be hard. Like I know, especially when I was writing Antonia's part, I was trying to make her like really stuck up, and my advisor was kind of like, she coming off too stereotypical, like you need to add more humanity into her. So that's something like you have to kind of edit it out. Rachel?
Kind of exactly off of that point, of what, in your process of creating the four characters, how did you go about making them very realistic and believable, and then like avoiding the archetype and giving it like detail and
I mean, I glossed through them like super quickly in this, but I basically have like pages and pages on my laptop saved of like every detail of their life that doesn't even come out in the writing, but like so I would know it and kind of make them seem real. I don't know if that answers it, but it was mostly before, but then as I wrote, I'd like come up with like there's like random like sticky notes all over my laptop being like Peter carries a notebook with him everywhere he goes. Like didn't go in everywhere, but does that make sense? I don't know. Lauren?
Why did you choose YA?
It kind of fit with what I was writing. There's like I think I read some YA. I wanted like the romance in it and kind of like the secrets. I feel like it's a little bit more dramatic than like adult fiction would be, and I think like teenage YA girls are like the audience I just wanted to write to. Yeah, thank you.